Welcome on this beautiful Sunday. My name is Robin Kall. I'm the host of Reading with Robin, all things bookish, and Jean and I will talk more about that. And here we are. I am in the role of Jean Kwok on her. I am technically you, Jean, because I am on your Facebook page interviewing you as me being you. So you. Jean Kwok is the New York Times and international best-selling, award-winning author of Searching for Sylvie Lee, Girl in Translation, and Mambo in Chinatown. Her work has been published in 20 countries and taught in universities, colleges, and high schools across the world. Today, we're going to be talking about the inspiration behind Jean's work, with the special emphasis on the schools in New York City she attended. PS 8 for elementary school, and then Hunter College High School before she went to Harvard and Columbia. And a special thanks to Hunter for inspiring this talk, especially to Ann Starr. Is that how I say her last name? I'm not sure. And Aniko Horvath. And first, so welcome everybody. Jean, thank you for asking me to do this.
Robin, I'm so glad you did this. This is, just really great to kind of connect with everyone, especially, in the middle of this really crazy time where we're all isolated and we're all in our own homes. So this is kind of just a nice Sunday afternoon chat. And I'm hoping that, your fans and friends of mine are here, but indeed a very special welcome to the Hunter alumni and the Hunter College High School Association, because they inspired this talk, they were behind it, and they've publicized it heavily. And one thing that I'm going to do right off the bat is that just an order of business is that there have been raffle tickets sold to the Hunter College High School alumni. If you did not know about this and you are not able to buy a ticket, don't worry. This is a thing that's for Hunter alumni to benefit Hunter, the school. But
What can you explain to me? Because it's not, I know about Hunter, of course, but how did they do the raffle? How is this working? What was the setup?
It's just that they're selling raffle tickets to benefit the school via their website. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be more than one drawing. I am going to be doing a drawing today for a signed copy of Searching for Sylvie Lee, of course. But there will be later drawings with the same ticket. So if you bought a ticket, you're still in the running. And there are, the Hamilton guy, he went to Hunter as well.
Lynn?
And yeah. So as you said, there'll be Hamilton tickets. Yeah, I forget his name. No, I know his name. Exactly. Thank you. Right. Right. And Elena Kagan and a lot of other great people. So anyway, I have very carefully cut up all of the names into my beautiful Polish pottery bowl, which I love. Yes, I love this bowl. I am not being biased.
No, you're not. Wait, I'm gonna look.
Yeah. If you bought more than one ticket, you're very lucky. I'm gonna count to 3 and pick one.
So
1, 2, 3. And this is the winning ticket. It is Denise Sofo, class of 74. Okay, so congratulations, Denise.
74.
You are the winner. Okay, awesome. So this is the winner of the signed copy of Searching for Sylvie Lee. But do not worry, because the names are going back in for further drawings at a later date for a lot of other great things, including another copy of
I love that.
Searching for Sylvie Lee. So
how are you mailing them out? Is your publisher mailing them out? What do you do?
We have signed them and sent them to the Hunter Alumni Association, so they have them and they're going to distribute them because they're extremely competent people, scary competent.
Absolutely. So amazing how I need to know the minutia of the detail. I'm like, how is she going to get her book? Yay, class of 74. So this is so much fun. I love this. I always have the best time with Jean, and we've had some really just such deep conversations. They're fun, they're lively. I'm always finding out something new that I didn't know about Jean and the books and your life. So we're going to start with growing up in New York City and your experience before you went to Hunter College High School. and also talk about the school, because I knew a little bit about it because we do know some kids that have gone there. They're not kids anymore, I guess. But talk about that and what it was like in New York City then.
Right. So basically, I'm going to talk about, first I'm going to talk about before Hunter. I'm going to try to share a screen again. So I'm going to show you guys some pictures, hopefully. Can you, I know there's like a 20-second delay, but hopefully you guys are seeing a picture of the Statue of Liberty. Because I'm of course not just talking about the school today, but I'm also talking about my work and how, you know, my background influenced my work and what happened to me, you know, when I was growing up. So you can see the slide?
I see the slide. It's perfect.
Okay, great. So, and by the way, welcome everyone, people who are just joining us. If you'd like to ask a question or comment or anything, please feel free to type it in the comments in the post. And there's a slight time delay, but we will, you know, we're monitoring them. We will be seeing them. So my story begins like that of so many other immigrants and other people in the US with a dream of America. And this is me, my mom, and my father when we first moved to New York when I was 5 years old. And you know, so I'm a first generation Chinese immigrant. And I remember I was in that car from JFK going to where we were going to live. And I expected to see like skyscrapers and women in fur coats and, you know, all the things that I had learned about America from the movies. But instead, we wound up in the slums of Brooklyn. And our apartment was so run down that it didn't even have a central heating system. So those of you who live in New York City and the North know how incredibly cold that meant that apartment became in the winter. And, you know, it was completely run down. There were rats, there were roaches. And, you know, we had been fairly wealthy in America before we came to the in China before we came to the US, but actually we had nothing but debt by the time we got to our apartment in Brooklyn. And so, you know, the windows didn't even have glass in the back of the apartment. And we took garbage bags and we would like tape over those gaping holes with duct tape. And the entire winter long, like the wind would just kind of gust against these garbage bags my entire childhood, basically. And the funny thing is that, you know, I'm talking with all of you about this now, but the fact is, you know, I never told anyone about this when I was living this story, because I just didn't think anyone would believe me. And I had actually told one friend from PS8 when she asked, "Where are you? And why can't I come to your house? And what is your life like?" I had told her the truth of my existence, and she told her father, and the father came back and said, "Well, she's lying, because kids don't live like that in America." And so I learned very early on to keep my mouth shut. So, you know, we were living in this place that was so overrun and so cold. I started going to PS8, but then at the same time after school, I started working in a clothing factory in Chinatown. And, you know, my entire family did that. My brothers who were in high school at the time did the same thing. So the morning my parents would bring me to school, they dropped me off. And then afterwards, I would get picked up and I would, you know, go and work in a clothing factory until like 9 or 10 at night. But my brothers, who, you know, were a bit older, would do the same thing, but they would actually go on to a second job waiting tables at a restaurant until like 2 or 3 in the morning. And then they go home, they sleep a couple of hours, and they would do it all again. So hopefully what you're seeing on your screen now is a photo of me and my brother Kwan, and I still had no teeth. But my brother Kwan was actually the one who kind of showed me the way out of poverty. And those of you who know something about my latest book, Searching for Sylvie Lee, know that it was his disappearance many years later that inspired Searching for Sylvie Lee. But in those days, actually, he was the one who started me being a writer, because he gave me one night a blank diary, and he said, whatever you write in this will belong to you. And you can imagine what an incredibly powerful idea that was to me at that time in my life, when I had, nothing and no one I could talk to. And at school, I was trying to pretend that things were normal and that, I had a normal life. Like, teachers would ask you to do things like draw your room. And I mean, I didn't have a room. I slept on a mattress on the floor. And our apartment was overrun. So I would just I would just lie. I'd make up like a fantasy room that, didn't exist. And, the only books I had, were from the public library or from, places like that literacy programs that gave them to me. So it was a very hard and very confusing time. And I was also really bad at school, so I mean, when I first started and I didn't speak any English, I got big red X's through everything. And then as I became better and learned English, and with the help of some, wonderful educators, this is a photo of me in elementary school with Mrs. Kassendorf, who was our elementary school principal. And she really, she really did a lot to kind of help me without knowing the true circumstances of how I lived. So, I think, a bright kid who was struggling sometimes, but also doing well. But then became the question of, what happens after I leave elementary school? And Mrs. Kassendorf was the one who said, well, maybe you should take some tests for private schools. We'll see if we can get you some scholarships. And maybe you should take these specialized tests for some of the New York magnet schools. And so she was really the one who got me to take a test. And that was how I got into Hunter. And Hunter College High School, for people who are not in New York City, is a magnet school. It's a public school, just like my elementary school was. It was a public school for intellectually gifted kids. That's the description. And for me, that was a real, gift. So my first book, Girl in Translation, for people who have read it, is very much based on that part of my life, about a smart girl who gets caught living a double life between her life working in a factory and at an exclusive private school. So in real life, you can see I did not wind up going to a private school. I went to a public high school, but I always thought, what if I'd had to go to one of those private schools? Because I think that would have been so hard for me. And in Girl in Translation, she winds up, choosing between her two lives and between two very cute guys that she meets, one from each place. And in the end, she has to choose not only which guy she's with, but, who she is and which future she chooses. So anyway, so that is the story of my life before I got to Hunter.
That was breathtaking, Jean. Thank you so much. Firstly, I'm so excited that the PowerPoint worked, so we have technology. Like, that is just amazing. But I was just transfixed. I mean, I certainly know a lot of the story. I hadn't seen the PowerPoint. And just thinking about the teachers who have made such a difference in all of our lives. I mean, it's been a long time since elementary school and all of that. And I can remember every teacher who was meaningful in some way, saw something in me that was unique, encouraged, brought me to the next step. And I treasure, there are so many teachers that are referred to, like my kids know some of those teachers. So when you showed that picture of you with your teacher and she saw that in you, and you think about how different life would be, you know, it all comes down to that education is everything, you know, and where it goes from there. So, and people were writing, somebody said they had shivers listening to it. And it is just, I mean, it is an amazing story to share. So thank you. So yeah.
Robin, thank you for saying that. And also, I think that my page is not updating somehow. So I am not seeing the comments. So if you
love them, Jean.
Oh, great. So if you see them and you can pick them out and throw them my way, please do that. Somehow I've had this before. Somehow it doesn't update while I'm on. So just throw them at me if there are things you want us to talk about.
Because I'm kind of playing the part of Jean today. I'm really controlling your page. So maybe that's why. But yeah, people that they loved it and that they loved. So Joyce says, thank you. I've never been to New York, so thank you for the reference point. It was really great. I agree to get all of that. If you haven't been there, and you know, it makes it come alive in that way. One of the people who are watching, I don't want to mispronounce anyone's name, said she loves to write in a journal too. And really, journaling is, we could do a whole show on that. Really, what keeping a journal and what that did for your brother to give you that expression and that privacy and that space to write. Do you have your journals? Did you save them?
I do. I have a huge stack of them. But that was really the moment when I started writing. And believe me, I'm not, there's so many like writers who are so far ahead of me who, like, I was hanging out with Meg Wolitzer, and Meg is so brilliant, and she just always knew she was going to be a writer. And it's so kind of free spirited about it. Like, I'm not like that. I didn't know I was going to be a writer. I was like, I need to get out of the factory. You know, that was my only goal, was to get out of the factory. I was not going to do something artsy fartsy like being a writer.
Practical and have a vocation and know that you're going to help yourself and your family, and writers all come. I know Meg well, and I'm a huge fan, and so there are definitely a lot of routes to writing, but I can imagine that wasn't what, you know, you were practical, and you're going to learn what you need to do and move your family onwards. So it's a very different vantage point.
That's right. And so the writing, I mean, that was kind of an opening, and I loved it. And I love to read. I think more than anything else, I love to read. I still love to read. It's still my favorite thing to do ever. And also for people who are listening,
you should read this.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you. But also, I was just going to say, Robin is one of those people with incredible taste. And she is, and I've been a fan of hers for so many years, because she kind of, like, I know a lot of people are joining us from the Read with Jenna Today Show group as well. It's like Robin's just one of those people like Jenna who has a great feeling for which books are going to be fantastic to read. So, you know, Reading with Robin is a fantastic page to kind of join, to, especially these days, to follow along with what's going on and to keep up to date with what's happening. With, you know, especially since we're all at home, if you want to see your favorite authors, they're all hanging out on Robin's page. Like, that's where we all are. So
thank you. Yeah, I feel like I'm never alone with my books and my author pals. It's been a really bizarre time, obviously, and scary time for so many reasons, but so comforted by the community. There's nothing like book people. I say it all the time.
Now that is the thing. Book people are the best people. So anyway, so, you know, we've gone up to the point where I entered Hunter. So yeah, I mean, going to Hunter was also a shock too, of course, especially from my background.
Yeah, and I mean, there is the idea of the opportunity and then the reality. And then when you talk about what you would tell your friends or what you really wanted to share, I mean, many people, you know, hide things, all sorts of different things. But balancing that with also learning and being a part of a school, you know, community, I'm sure that's an incredible skill set, which probably serves very well with writing fiction in some way. Are you still friends with kids that you went to school with?
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, some of my
Maybe
absolute,
they're
yeah, I hope so. I hope so. But some of my absolute best friends, of course, went to Hunter. And I still actually, one of my best friends from PSA is still one of my best friends today, and her name is Sari Wilson. She's a writer, and yes,
yes,
she
I thought
is.
you recognized me.
She wrote Girl Through Glass,
Yeah.
which is a beautiful book, and she's the inspiration for the best friend character in my book, my debut novel, Girl in Translation. So Sari is actually a very beautiful woman, and Annette it's a kind of like as poofy football hair, but the spirit, the warmth is totally based on Sari. But indeed, I have a lot of friends that I made at Hunter too, and they're often like in my acknowledgments and stuff like that. But I would have to say that it was a real shock, a challenge, and a relief to go to Hunter, because Hunter is filled with really smart kids, and they're not just kind of naturally smart. Some of them are kind of super smart, like super trained, super smart. So I maybe had some aptitude, but I was not trained. I mean, almost no one in my house even spoke English. So that was difficult. I mean, there were things that I really, if it was a shock to realize, of course, how advanced some of those kids could be. They're the kids of like Columbia professors, and they're intellectuals by themselves. And so they've been reading a certain type of book, they've been engaging in a certain type of discourse. And I was, kind of just trying to speak English. And so I remember that like you said, so many educators were just a tremendous inspiration in so many ways, even though no one knew the truth of my existence. And that was something that I was careful to do. I mean, I kept that secret. It was my decision. And I always tell people when I give a talk like this, I say, don't judge a kid by the outside, because how a kid looks on the outside could be so different from how they are on the inside. And I know, especially like in 7th grade, when I had first entered Hunter, we had a fantastic social studies teacher who someone know, Mr. Marienhoff. And he was just so challenging and smart. And he loved kind of smart, sassy kids. I was not a smart, sassy kid. I mean, I didn't even make eye contact, because I had been taught at home that a good Chinese girl did not make eye contact, did not open her mouth, did not have strong opinions. I was clearly a disaster as a Chinese girl. But, in all these ways I had been taught. And, there were things that he had us do that were so hard for me. Like he gave us current events quizzes. And, he said, well, there is no excuse for any of you not knowing the headlines of what's going on in the world, because you have to participate in the world. Now, that was true, of course, absolutely. Problem is, I had no context for understanding those headlines. I did not understand what was going on in Cuba or in Europe. Like, I didn't even know where those places were. We had to choose a language when we went to Hunter, and I picked Latin. And on the first day, we went to Latin class, and this lovely Latin teacher said, so I want to know, why did you guys all pick a dead language? And I was like, it's dead? Oh my God. Like, I had no idea it was dead. I mean, I kind of just picked it at random. So I was at that stage, and then dealing with, a lot of kids and a lot of material that was way more advanced than I was.
Everything about you is endlessly charming and fascinating. And yeah, like, right, you picked Latin, of course, but I would think, of course you did, because intuitively you would know that that would serve you well in so many ways. But even though, like, right, a dead language, I would have said, well, why are you teaching a dead language? Because growing up as a Jewish girl, we were not told to keep our mouths quiet or not look someone in the eye. So very different perspective, So it's yeah, that's probably what my smart mouth would have said. But I think
Well,
yeah, I think what are some of the things that allowed you to excel there? You know, what are some of those traits? And I like what you said about not judging really anybody anytime. We just don't know from the outside what somebody's circumstances are, and also what they're capable of, and given the right set. But anyway, so what are some of those attributes you think that propelled you forward in your
well,
career in school?
I think that's something that was different about me and from a lot of other kids was that like my back was up against the wall, and I think that was something that I never said to my friends when I was there because I mean, God, that's so not cool, right? I was not gonna, nobody knew what my background was like. And I, as a teenager, homogeny is the thing, right? You want to hide it. You are not, in a way, you're trying to be so individualistic, but you want to be individualistic in conformity with a certain group that you're trying to belong to. And, so in a way, that is the age when you're actually trying to hide the things that are most unique about yourself. And for me, like school was not a game. Like it was like my life because there were two things going on. Number one was that I had grown up in extreme poverty, extreme, where my mother made my clothing and, we worked our hands off at that factory day and night. My mother fell asleep over piles of clothing, like night after night after night. And we were paid 1 penny for piece, 1 penny. And so she would bring home extra to work on, and so my, part of me was this kind of desperate urge to escape the factory and a whole life cycle at the factory where you grow up and then you start working on the sewing machines and you cut thread when you're old, it's the circle of life. um, but then the other part of me was that, like I said earlier, I was also not a good Chinese daughter. So my family like despaired of ever finding a guy willing to marry me. And I understood that in their mind, I had two routes, I had two paths I could take. I could either continue at the factory until I was old and dead, basically, or if I was lucky, maybe I'd find some nice guy who was like an accountant, maybe, or something, and that I could stay home and cook for him and clean for him and bear his children, male children only. And, I could like have a life where it was a little bit easier. But the problem was they were like, nobody's going to want to marry her. So, we don't know where that's going. And so I knew from a very young age, those were my two paths. And I thought to myself, you know what? I know exactly which path I'm going to pick. I thought, I'm going to go to Harvard. And I decided that. And my eye was on Harvard from the time I was 7 years old. I had to get in. And the reason was because, number one, I knew that it had a need blind admissions policy. So if I got in, I could afford to go. And then the second reason was because my parents had heard of it. And it was like the only school they'd ever heard of. So
7 years old. I mean, it's amazing, Jane, because I mean, I do know some 7-year-olds that maybe say they want to go, but that's because someone in their family has gone. And so there's that. But for you at 7, I mean, you're so driven and such a direction, but that's not what a 7-year-old usually, is thinking. It's your whole story is just incredible. There are so many questions. I just want to ask, Karen Katz would like you to mention some other Hunter teachers' names when you talk about the classes, and appreciated the Marienhof mention. So if there's some other teachers, I hate to.
Oh yeah, yeah. No. I mean, like, there's so many. Like Mrs. Basias, Evanthia Basias was my math teacher, and she, and this is like the great thing about Hunter. So when I went there, it was co-ed. It used to be an all-girls school, but there was no feeling like that as a woman you wouldn't be able to do something. And I remember I was like terrified, little me in her math class, which was freaking hard. I mean, it was 7th grade, and it was like, oh my God, are we doing matrices? Like, are we supposed to be doing this in college? Like, we're working like years ahead. And I remember Mrs. Basias came to me and she said, you are really talented in math. And she said, I want you to go in the math team, and I'm expecting great things from you in math. And I thought, wow, maybe I can do this, you know? So there was her, and there was Mr. Kisner, who was my Latin teacher, who was terrifying, but so funny. But then again, you know, in that duality, I think that I hope that my teachers maybe thought I was smart, but I was sometimes very quiet in class. And I was so quiet in Latin class that I think Mr. Kisner wasn't really sure what to think of me. And I'm still calling him Mr. Kisner, but I'm not calling him Irving, you know? So he wasn't quite sure what to think of me. And I remember one time I did well on the test, but I still had that thing I had learned from home where I was afraid to speak in class. And he said to me, he said, did you cheat on this? And I was like, no, like, you know, it never occurred to me to cheat on a translation. And he would like abruptly call on me in class, just I think to make sure that I actually was who I appeared to be. And I remember that finally, like when I went to college, he wrote one of my recommendations. I think I saw it somehow. And he said, you know, her silence is not that, it was something really beautiful. It's not that of an empty hole, but rather of a deep well that runs deep or something. And I thought that was just so beautiful that he understood why I was quiet.
Still waters run deep. That's exactly what I was thinking when you were saying that. And sometimes a child that's quiet, it can be misconstrued as not really being engaged, and they're just, it's so in there, and not everybody's got that same comfort level. And for a teacher to be able to pick up on that, you know, again, that's why, I mean, teachers are everything. So I love that people are asking you to talk about your teachers. So then all right, so Harvard. So I just think of Elle Woods, you know, like it's hard. So you had your sights set on Harvard at 7. Did you apply to many schools? Was that like, or did you apply like early decision and then you were going there? I don't know when you went even. So when.
So, right.
So I mean. So I've no.
Well, so what happened was that, you know, I was at Hunter, and I think in some ways I started to become myself at Hunter, but, you know, I was not one of the cool kids, you know. I mean, cool is a relative term when you go to a school like Hunter, but, you know, I love all of us desperately, but I was not, you know, I took Latin, and I was really into math and science because I was heading for a real job. And it was something I liked, something I enjoyed a lot. And, you know, I do think that just kind of socially, even before we get to the Harvard part, I think that socially speaking, you know, that concentration I had, you know, knowing that, because I also, the thing I didn't mention is that if I didn't get into Harvard, I think I wouldn't have been allowed to go to college. I think that my family would have said, it's not necessary for a girl to go. You can stay and live at home and maybe take a couple of classes at community college, maybe, but there was not going to be an option to spend money and send me away, which was a very threatening thing to them, somewhere else. But that was a part of my life that I really couldn't share with any of my friends at school. So that was hard. And I think that, you know, kind of like Sylvie in my book, Searching for Sylvie Lee, I really do understand what that's like to try so hard and feel like you have to overcompensate just to be normal. And then because you're overcompensating, it's not that easy to make friends. I mean, luckily I did still have friends, but you create a kind of distance between yourself and other people because you're not really, you know, hanging out, chilling with the cool kids. Like you are like a machine, you know?
Yeah.
You're like, I am gonna get the grades and I'm going there.
And then there's this sense of competition and, you know, students vying for similar schools and, you know, and how that goes. And, you know, just trying to make sense of everything and having your eye on the goal. So Yeah.
No, that's right. That's right. And actually, I wanted to say earlier when you were talking about being Jewish, I still had a very limited understanding of American culture because, I was really still a very recent immigrant, and because I went to Hunter, I thought like everyone in America was Jewish. Like I did not understand that this was a very specific subsection of New York City. So because everybody, like it seemed like everyone I knew was Jewish, I thought like bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, like I was in the bar mitzvah zine. So that was something great. I mean, I still feel very much like a Jew, even though I am Buddhist.
Similar, yes, and in the way of education and things that are important in family, and all of that. There's so many parallels, certainly. So just depending on who got here when, really, and who had opportunity when they did. So yeah, I can imagine you. So you were with the cool kids at the bar and bat mitzvah.
Yeah, well, I don't know about cool, but I learned the little dances. I mean, anyway, and so another teacher I just wanted to give a special mention to was Mrs. Eichler, Sue Eichler, who came recently to my Searching for Sylvie Lee reading, and I was like, Mrs. Eichler. She's like, no, Sue. I'm like, no, I can't.
So hard.
But the great thing, I know. But the great thing about Mrs. Eichler for me was that she was incredibly smart, really hard, social studies teacher, but also Asian. And that was, kind of amazing to have a role model also at that age. But anyway, I'm sorry, Robin, you asked me about getting to Harvard and how I did that. So I had my eye on it, but of course I was not arrogant enough to think that I was a shoo-in. I mean, I knew that I with, great good luck and many prayers, I might have a chance. So I remember it was senior year, and I was hanging out at the lockers, and I had not applied early anywhere. I was kind of just trying to figure out what I was going to do. And the guidance counselor came by, and she said to me, she said, Jean, she said, are you applying early to Harvard? And I was like, oh God, no, that hadn't occurred to me. I said, no. And she said, well, why not? And I said, because I won't get in. I mean, like, who gets in early? And she said, if you're not the kind of kid who gets in early, then who is? And I thought, wow. So that was just this kind of mark of confidence in me that I was really amazed by. And, I have to tell you, even writing, there's so many obstacles kids can have at home that are invisible. There's something that I also haven't shared. It was like, I did not have a computer. I had an old manual typewriter, and I remember typing out that application as it was due. It had to be postmarked by that night. And it's one of those booklets. And so you type on one side, you type on another side, and then you close it, you type on the back.
Right.
And because I had this manual typewriter, what happened was the booklet closed, you type on the back of it, and everything in the middle smeared. Everything. Yeah. So it was this one big black mush. And I have to say, my family members some of them were not enthusiastic about the idea of me applying to Harvard and possibly leaving home as a young girl, were not helpful, and I remember just having this moment of despair where my application was completely screwed up. And I just had to, pull myself out of it. So I did. I mean, I managed to, I don't remember how, but redo it, retype it so that they could see it and get it in on time. But there's so many things that kids have to deal with.
So everything, right. So like at every juncture, it wasn't simple, but you were just focused and going ahead. I mean, right. So down to all of that. And now it's, what year was this? Because I really have no sense of the year.
Yeah. So I went to Harvard in the 90s, and I did get in early. And of course I was totally, driven. So I was like, if you had a certain number of APs and certain scores in them, you were allowed to skip a year. So I entered actually as a sophomore.
Of course you did.
Instead of a freshman. Yeah. And I, with them, because I wanted to.
Yeah.
I wanted to, get my degree in physics. And it was really when I was there that I realized, okay, then maybe I can, I don't have to have a life in the factory. Maybe I can do what I really want to do, which is to become a writer. And so it was in college that I made the decision to go ahead and become a writer.
Oh my goodness. I mean, the story just goes on. It is fascinating, encouraging, just so beautiful, and just like everything that we love about reading and storytelling is in your story. You have so many comments and questions.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yeah. Oh, oh God, there's so many questions. You
Robin, thank you.
You're welcome. You probably want to go back later and look at
I
some of
will.
these, because
I will. I'll go through and I'll answer
yeah,
and
it's
address.
tricky because there's so many things that don't then translate. Actually, one of the questions was, how did you wind up in the Netherlands? I know we talked about that, but somebody else also asked about that.
Well, I'm going to actually show you guys a picture. If I can manage to share a screen again. I had a couple of pictures set up. Oh, did I do it? Are you sharing? Yes. Okay. Hold on. In case of certain questions. So there we go. This is my wedding day. Can you see it?
It's gorgeous. Yes, I see it.
Yeah. So this is on my wedding day, and I'm there with my husband, and guess what? I'm still married to the guy. So despite my terrible cooking and opinionated self and all these, but you know what? My brothers to this day, they still feel sorry for him because he's married to me. So whenever they see him, they're like, "Are you okay? We know your life is so hard."
He looks very, very happy. Are you anywhere near the pancake bakery in this picture?
Well, I'm not sure, but this picture was taken in Leiden. And so this is, on our wedding day, this is me with my husband and my in-laws. And then the guy with his back to us is my brother Kwan, all grown up. So he has been so much a part of my life and a part of the inspiration for searching for Sylvie Lee, because as some of you know, he disappeared just as my debut novel was being published. And so that was, that was the inspiration, the emotional heart of Searching for Sylvie Lee, which is of course about what happens when the dazzling, brilliant older sister Sylvie disappears, and her younger sister Amy, who's always been her shadow, has to pull herself together and find out what happened to her.
You just weave it together so beautifully. Who wanted to know? Somebody wants to know what you are doing next. Somebody asked, oh, you're an inspiration. Stephen says, loved all your books and wants to know what's coming up next.
Well, I am working on a book that is due this summer. Oh my God. I'm working on a new book for my beloved editor, and it is about a young Chinese American immigrant, a recent immigrant, who comes with her little brother, who she desperately wants to take care of. And she becomes a suspect in the murder of her lover. And in fact, as some of you may know, there are real cats in all of my books. And I'm going to catch one right now and bring her to you. Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to be right back. Just keep talking, Robin.
I'll just keep talking. So Jean is going to catch a cat. And when Jean and I chatted a couple of weeks ago, I was able to see two. But I love the way Jean works the cats into the stories, because there's, let's face it, there's nothing like our furry friends. Now, I wonder how far Jean's gone to
this is
cat.
one.
Oh, okay.
This is Calypso. Hi.
Oh, what a sweet face.
This is Calypso, and she is starring in the new book that I'm working on. See? And Couscous, of course, from Searching from Sylvie Lee, is here too, but she is hidden away. So she thinks I'm weird talking to this thing. So
I love that you got Calypso. Wait, so was she like on standby? Was Calypso like, I know?
She was trying to get in from the backyard. So
she's so sweet. I was telling, while I had the little intermission, I was telling the audience that I had the pleasure of seeing two of them when we last chatted. what was I going to ask you? I don't know how long the Hunter Gang was thinking we would go.
I think about an hour.
Oh, okay. Because Jean and I could just talk all day. But but I'm so excited to hear. So this book, when you say the book is due this summer, so the first draft, is that what's due?
Right. I'm going to, I personally really want to submit it to my editor by the end of the summer so that she can start working on it together with me. So that means indeed the book needs to, it's not the first draft, it'll probably be the third draft by the time she sees it at least. It needs to be done and it needs to be readable and, you know, something I'm not incredibly ashamed of.
Okay, so it's not the first draft, so it's about the third draft. And I think that's something that readers find very interesting. If you could do like a quick, like how does the book, you know, gets to the editor, third draft, something that's readable, and then talk about the copy edits and the back and forth, and then when we can, of course, expect hopefully to see this book on shelves.
Well, you know, the thing with every book is that it has to have a kind of intellectual heart and an emotional heart. And then, you know, it grows from there. And then from that moment on, as the writer, I'm a really big believer in structure. So I am not going to like put my readers on a boat, send them to the middle of the ocean and let them sink. You know, I'm going to bring you back to shore. I swear, I'm going to bring you back. So I want my books to be both entertaining, like really fun to read on a certain level, but also to be about things that are really important to me, like poverty, immigration, understanding each other, compassion, you know, language, all of those things. So, you know, it's kind of like when I write the book, I'm trying to weave all of those strands together. I hope, a pretty good job. I give it to my editor, and I'm talking to her along the way, kind of telling her what I'm thinking and, you know, how it's going and that the cat ate it. And that's why I'm not going to give it to her Tuesday, like I said, but maybe a little bit later than that. And so, you know, I put the book together, and then my editor and I will probably work on it together for around at least a year. So usually an editor will give you about 3 rounds. You do about 3 rounds with an editor where, you know, there's content and where she really looks at it from a distance and says, I love it, but I'm not sure that this relationship is developed enough. Like, we'd love to see more scenes of them together, or, you know, I don't really understand why she did X, Y, and Z. Can you explain that to me? You know, just things like that, so that you really kind of flesh out the book. Mm-hmm. And then at a certain point, the editor will go through and do a line edit. And, you know, every change has to be approved by the author. So they will not change a comma without our permission, but we'll look at it and then be like, okay, well, I think that's good. No, I like it really better this way. We're going to move this around. So there's a lot of work. And then after your editor's done, there are like 1 million copy editors that are going to go through, and they copy edit not only for punctuation and grammar, but they copy edit for things like, are her eyes still green at the back of the book when they were green at the beginning? It's
amazing, the detail and the collaborative effort between the author and the editor, and then, like you say, the copy edits and all of the eyeballs and all of the you know, things being factually true. And yeah, like, wait, they didn't have a pocketbook. How did she leave with the bag when she didn't enter and look through, you know? And because your readers are such smart readers, we know that readers pick up on these things and often love to share them. I'm not talking about your book.
Oh, yeah.
In general, they'll, you know, I see them on the pages and I'm like, you know, it's a lot of work to get the book into somebody's hands in the way that everybody wants it to be. So
you know, Robin, that is so true, because, you know, look, by the time I give it to my editor, I have probably gone through it at least 3 or 4 times. I go through it at least another 3 times, sometimes more, with my editor together very carefully. And then we go through it with copy editors, like I think at least another 3 times. So we've been through it carefully, like about almost 10 times before it goes on the shelves, and still you can screw up. So let me tell you about like an embarrassing thing in Searching for Sylvie Lee that I almost left unchecked. And what happens is, you write the book, But as you're writing, you get inspired and you change things in the book. But then sometimes you don't change everything you needed to change. Like a lot of times you don't. So a couple of things, like because Searching for Sylvie Lee is a mystery and we're trying to figure out what happened to her. And we spend, we're told the story from 3 points of view, from Sylvie's, from Amy's, and from Ma's point of view. And they're each thinking in their own language. So Ma's thinking in Chinese, Sylvie's thinking in Dutch, and Amy's thinking in English. There's a lot of room in that narrative. And of course, the book is in English, but the inner thoughts are in those languages. There's a lot of room. And so, there's a lot of room for the reader to fill in. And so, for example, I had to deepen the relationship with the grandmother, between Sylvie and her dying grandmother, who's the person she goes to the Netherlands to see. And when I did that, I inserted a few scenes, and then I wound up moving the timeline a couple of days, and then suddenly you map it out and you think, oh my God, that's not a Wednesday, that's a Friday, or it's not a Friday, it's a Sunday, and there shouldn't be a construction crew working down the street on a Sunday because they don't work on Sundays in the Netherlands. So there's all kinds of stuff like that. But then the big mistake I almost made was that as I was writing about Sylvie, the brilliant, dazzling, beautiful, successful Sylvie, I decided to give her a shellfish and fish allergy. So, I thought, yeah, that's interesting. It forms her character, So I do this, I thread it throughout the entire book. And then at the end of all these edits and drafts, I look back and I realize her father works in a fish store and brings home fish all the time for them to eat. So I was just like, oh my God. So it was an easy fix. I could just write a paragraph about how he was resentful that she didn't eat the fish. But if I had left it, it would have been so dumb. So dumb,
That is so funny. But would someone have caught it though? Your editor, copy editor, somebody would have said, no?
Well, honestly, I caught it right at the end of the publishing process. So somehow, even though people caught a lot of very brilliant, very great things, we all kind of missed that one. Maybe somebody would have caught it before the absolute final edit. Yeah.
That's so funny. You see them sitting down to crack a lobster tail or something. It is an interesting thing. And as from my side of things, because we receive the books when we receive an early copy of a book, it's gone through a lot of this. I don't know how far in the process, but we always get the books and they say, these are not final, please don't quote, and all these changes. And because of what I do and have been doing for so many years, it's always a little tricky for me when I notice, and I'm not talking punctuation, grammar, but something that's just wrong. And I always think, the book is coming out in say 3 months. I don't know when sometimes there's still time, and sometimes I get books 6 to 9 months ahead. And I always feel like I'm not trying to be right, but I've noticed some really obvious things that are wrong. For example, a book, it's a recent book, I don't remember off the top of my head, mentions a student at Brown Law School. Now there's no law school at Brown. I wrote to the publicist kindly and I said, I picked up on something, might you want to know? And they thanked me. I wasn't trying to be that's not how you wouldn't take a left turn on Thayer Street or whatever. I was like, there is no Brown Law School, and so if you can say Brown, so sometimes it's appreciated. But I've caught some really interesting things that way just because I'm such a close reader, or that's, where it depends, I guess, on the publicist, but I always wonder, and I've posted, authors, would you want to know?
Well, we do want to know, because early on, because actually we can fix it, they can fix it. So it's even if there's a tiny mistake you find in between the hardcover and the paperback, the paperback of Searching for Sylvie Lee is coming out at the end of July, on July 28th. Yeah, so that's exciting. We did catch one very tiny thing that my Dutch translator saw. It was just a slight logistical problem that she caught it. We changed it in the paperback.
Cool. Yeah, what we don't, and I always tell readers, like what we don't want to see is once the book is out there, or if it's in paperback or whatever, readers don't need to show how, whatever they are and post about it, and I always encourage, and
Right, right.
I'm going to tell people now too, it's such a kind thing to do for authors that you love to leave Goodreads reviews, to leave Amazon reviews, to follow your favorite authors, certainly Jean on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, like things and share the books. That's such a wonderful thing to do for a beloved author, and not to write, there was a mistake.
Right, right. Well, you know what's very hard for authors sometimes is like when somebody like reviews you on Amazon and they give your book like 1 star
You have to give
because they
5.
ordered the book and like it didn't come on time, and then you're just like, oh God.
No. I always, the
Yeah,
caveat is, if you're going to leave a review, leave good reviews or don't leave reviews.
yeah,
That's my opinion.
right,
Uh,
right.
and it helps with the algorithms. It helps all around, and it's a really kind thing to do for an author. Leave 5-star
Right.
reviews.
For us, I have to say it does really make a difference, the
Yes.
people who review. And, obviously, be honest, but if you can be kind, it's greatly appreciated.
Yes, because
You know,
I think with all of the books that I talk about, and people have said, I like everything, and I've said this many times, and I say, no, I talk about the books that I love.
exactly,
I don't talk
exactly.
about it. If I've put a book down for whatever reason, I'm not going to talk about it. It doesn't mean that I don't love books that I don't get to talk about. But if I've
Right.
talked about a book, it's because I've loved it.
That's right. That's right.
There's no win in doing that to somebody's amazingly grueling work and passion. So I just like to share that sometimes, but I think it's just about time to go. So final thought.
Well, I just want to say, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everybody who came to listen to this. Please do, stay in touch. I mean, these days, it's such a, it's a lonely time. We're separate. And like, what can be better than book lovers who kind of can connect on social media if we can't connect on real life? So, if you enjoyed the talk, please do like my page, but also click on the link to Reading with Robin and like her page as well, because Robin does, she's saying, how to help us, how to help authors. She does so much that is so good for so many different writers and bookstores and the entire literary industry today. So it really does help. If you go over, give her a like, you can follow along and watch her interview loads of authors, not just me, but also some other very dazzling, very wonderful, very funny and witty people. And it's a way for us all to stay connected in this time. So thank you guys all so much. I will go through and look at all of the comments.
You're going to
And
be busy, Jean. You're going to have a homework assignment. You're going to go through all of the comments. And my battery died, so I couldn't continue to look. And because Jean and I are in the Zoom app, we couldn't do more than that. But it's something fun for you to do, like after our wonderful conversation. And thank you so much for all of your kind words. And so excited and looking forward to sharing your next book when it is. There's no, in its time. And thank you so much to Hunter for hosting us, for suggesting this, and congratulations again to your raffle winner, and for allowing me to take over your Facebook page, Jean. Very trusting.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Okay, so thank you guys all so much for listening. Take care until the next time. Bye.
Happy reading. Stay well. Be safe. Bye-bye.